312 actors tried. 312 actors failed. Some lasted 4 minutes, some lasted 2. One celebrated stage veteran from the West End lasted 6 minutes and 40 seconds before she threw her script across the room and walked out crying. Not a single performer in the English-speaking world had survived Sir Edward Hartwell's audition intact. Not one. His name was Sir Edward Hartwell. Not a stage name, not a character. The man himself. In the theater circles of post-war London, they called him the Hammer, not because he built things, because he demolished them. A former Royal Shakespeare Company director who had crossed over to film in 1948 and brought with him a method so ruthless, so precisely designed to destroy ordinary performers and reveal extraordinary ones. That word of it had spread from London to New York like a cold wind through an open door. The method was simple. You came in, you began your scene, and somewhere between the first minute and the sixth, Sir Edward Hartwell would stand up from his chair, walk to the center of the rehearsal room, and begin. Not direction, not notes, demolition. He would dissect your performance in real time, in front of everyone present, his producers, his assistants, the casting staff, with the surgical precision of a man who had spent 30 years finding every fault line in the human ego and pressing on it until something either cracked or held. He did not raise his voice. That was the terrifying part. He was quieter than the room around him. He would list your failures in a voice like a doctor delivering a terminal diagnosis. Flat, clinical, final. You are performing the idea of grief. You have never felt grief. This is decoration. This is wallpaper. This is an insult to the character and to the audience and to the very concept of theater. We are done here. I will not be contacting you. 312 performers. The list read like a casualty report. West End veterans, Broadway ingenues, celebrated radio actresses, award-winning stage talents. Different backgrounds, different training, same result. Expose, dismantled, sent home with something taken from them that was very difficult to get back. The role they were all auditioning for was the female lead in Hartwell's new film, a story about a young woman navigating the moral wreckage of post-war Europe, the kind of role that could define a career. A contract sat on Hartwell's table at every audition, still unsigned, untouched. London, the Aldwych Theatre rehearsal rooms, March of 1952. Audrey Kathleen Rustin was 23 years old, 5 feet 7 inches, and weighed barely 100 pounds. Not because she was fashionable, because 7 years earlier she had survived the Dutch hunger winter on tulip bulbs and grass pulled from frozen ground. Her body still carried that history in the way that bodies always carry the things that nearly killed them. She was doing chorus work in a West End revue, 3 minor British films that no one remembered. When her name appeared on Hartwell's audition list, one of his assistants circled it in pencil and wrote a single word beside it. Filler. She had heard about the audition through a choreographer she knew. She had heard about Hartwell through everyone. In London's theater world in 1952, you could not have heard about Sir Edward Hartwell. His auditions were discussed the way people discuss natural disasters, with awe, with distance, with the kind of fascination that comes from being certain something will never happen to you because you will never be foolish enough to stand in its path. Audrey signed up anyway. There was a quality in her that was very difficult to name and very easy to feel. She had lived through things that permanently alter the relationship between a person and fear. German soldiers, starvation, the death of everything she had planned her life around. Ballet. Her father walking out a door one morning when she was 6 years old and never coming back. She had stood in the ruins of everything she had expected her life to be, and she had not collapsed. She had simply asked, "What else?" There is a particular kind of courage that only develops in people who have already lost the things they thought they could not survive losing. It has no bravado in it, no performance. It is entirely quiet. Audrey had that quality. On the morning of the audition, she arrived early. She sat in the hallway outside the rehearsal room and listened. 3 performers went before her, a trained stage actress from Bristol, 29, 8 years of experience. 4 minutes and 12 seconds. a television actress who had been on the cover of 2 theater magazines that season. 3 minutes and 51 seconds. A young woman who had just finished a critically praised run at the National. 5 minutes and 8 seconds. When she came out, her jaw was set in the specific way that means a person is deciding not to cry until they are somewhere private. Audrey watched all 3 of them leave. She did not look away. She was not cataloging their failures or calculating her own odds. She was going back, not to preparation, not to technique. Back to Arnhem in the winter of 1944. Back to the sound of her own stomach. Back to the moment she understood that her ballet teacher was right and her body had been permanently damaged, and the thing she had kept herself alive for was gone. She went back to the place where she had learned that the worst thing a room can do to you is make you small, and that you only become small if you believe the room has that power. She was still sitting with that knowledge when the door opened and a young assistant called her name. The rehearsal room smelled of cold coffee and cigarettes, and the particular anxiety of a space where people had been performing all morning. Hartwell was sitting at a long table with 3 other people, including a producer whose name she had seen on the posters of 4 significant films. He did not look up when she entered. He let her stand there for 20 seconds before he set his papers down and looked at her. His expression was not unkind. It was simply accurate. He was assessing, not her face, not her figure. Something else. The way she held herself. The way her hands were. He told her the scene. 2 pages. A woman receiving news that someone she loved had not survived the war. Red cold, no preparation, no rehearsal. That was the point. The raw material, not the manufactured product. Audrey nodded. She took the pages. She read them once. Then she set them down. She began. What happened in the next 4 minutes is difficult to describe accurately because the people in that room later described it in ways that did not fully agree, the way witnesses always describe things that move them beyond the range of ordinary language. What they agreed on was this. She was not performing. The distinction sounds simple, and it is not. Every professional in that room had spent years learning to perform. They had been trained in the mechanics of emotion, the architecture of feeling, the technical construction of moments that looked real. Hartwell had spent 30 years building a method specifically designed to collapse that construction and find out if there was anything underneath it worth keeping. What was underneath Audrey Hepburn was not a technique. It was 1944. It was hunger. It was a father who left. It was the moment a ballet teacher told her the truth, and the truth was a door closing on everything she had wanted. All of that not performed, not accessed through craft, but simply present, the way scar tissue is present, permanently, quietly, without being summoned. At the 4-minute mark, Hartwell stood up. The room shifted. The producer set down his pen. This was the moment. This was what everyone who knew his method understood was coming. He walked to the center of the room. He stood 6 feet from Audrey. He was a large man, well over 6 feet, with the physical authority of someone who had commanded rooms for decades. He looked at her with the specific intention of making her feel seen in a way that undid her. He opened his mouth, and Audrey looked at him, not defensively, not with the braced for impact stillness of someone preparing to absorb a blow. She looked at him the way she had looked at the pages of her scene, with complete, unhurried attention. Her hands were still, her feet were still, her eyes were. This is the word that everyone in that room used separately when they described it later. Patient. She was not waiting for the attack. She was simply there, fully in the way that a person is fully there when they have already been through the worst thing and knows with the certainty that only experience provides, that whatever is coming next is survivable. Hartwell said nothing for 3 seconds. This had never happened. He always spoke immediately. The pause was his weapon. He filled the pause, and the pause became unbearable, and the performer broke into it with something, a flinch, a word, an involuntary sound. And then he had them. But the pause required the other person to feel the silence as a threat. Hostile silence needs 2 people to create it. Audrey did not receive his silence as hostile. She received it as simply a moment in which nothing was being said yet. 1 second, 2, 3. 4. The producer had stopped breathing. The two actors waiting against the wall were gripping their thighs. Hartwell's assistant had set down her clipboard. On the 5th second, something happened that no one in that room had seen in 312 auditions. Sir Edward Hartwell looked away first. Not dramatically, not with any visible recognition. He simply found that he had nothing to aim at. The architecture of his method required one specific thing: the moment of exposure. The gap between the performer's constructed surface and the frightened, uncertain person underneath it. He had found that gap in every performer he had ever auditioned. But in Audrey Hepburn, there was no gap. Not because she had constructed a flawless surface. Because there was no surface. There was only a person, entirely present, entirely real. The thing he spent his entire career trying to excavate had been there since she walked through the door, unhurried and complete, waiting for no one to find it. He turned back to his table. He sat down. He picked up his pen. He said, "Continue the scene." She continued. When it was over, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked her one question, not about her training, not about her credits. He asked, "Where did you go just now during the scene?" She thought about it. She said, "Somewhere I already know. Somewhere I have already been. I did not need to go looking for it." He looked at her for a moment longer. Then he slid the contract across the table. His assistant, who had sat in every audition for 4 years and watched 312 performers leave that room with something missing from them, watched Audrey Hepburn leave with everything she had arrived with. She understood she had just seen something that would not repeat itself easily. A woman who could not be demolished because she had already rebuilt herself from materials that do not break. In the autumn of 1952, while filming what would become her breakthrough role, a journalist asked Audrey how she had handled the notorious Hartwell audition. The journalist expected a story about nerves and terror and the impossible pressure of the most feared room in British film. Audrey considered the question for a moment. Then she said, "I was not afraid of him. I was grateful for him. He was looking for something real, and I had nothing else to offer." She said it with a small smile. The kind of smile that belongs to people who have found, through the worst possible methods, that the thing others spend their whole lives trying to construct, a self that cannot be broken by a room full of people watching, was already there. Had been there since a winter in Arnhem when she learned that hunger is very loud, and that the only answer to very loud things is to go somewhere inside yourself that is very, very still. The monster met the water, and the water did not move.